What's up, everybody? Welcome to Win Championship Traits for Life, a show focused on strengthening the mental fitness of athletes, coaches, and anyone and everyone that works with the team at any level. I'm Lee Elias, that's JB Spizo, and we are joined today by 15-year NHL veteran, former captain, 5-time All-Star, 2-time Olympic gold medalist, and current director of player development for the Columbus Blue Jackets, Rick Nash. Rick, it really is an honor to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here. I appreciate you guys having me.
I'm going to keep that clip. I'm going to save that clip. That's going to be our clip before all episodes of you saying that. No, I appreciate that, Rick. And yeah, we appreciate you giving us some time today. So I wanted to start right away with this. It was recently announced the Blue Jackets are going to retire your number 61 on March 5th at Nationwide Arena, which is a tremendous honor. Obviously, congratulations for that. It is well-deserved. And my question to you is not how does it feel, right? But what or who do you think about when you reflect on such a prestigious honor like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first thing that comes to mind are my kids. To think that, you know, when I'm long gone and, you know, they're going to have their kids and their grandkids, that they're going to be able to come to Nationwide Arena and look up and say, you know, that was my dad, that was my grandpa, that was my great grandpa. That kind of hits home to me, to think that this is forever. And I get to go beside the Columbus Blue Jackets owner, John H. McConnell. His initials are up in the rafters. He's the one that brought the Blue Jackets to town. You see his family's name all over the hospitals in Columbus and the charities that they give back to. So I think that's kind of where it hits home for me. That's the first thing I think of is my family, and I think of my parents. It's funny, with me being a dad now, the only way your kid makes it as a professional athlete is if your parents are dedicated. And I shouldn't say the only way, I should say it has a huge part of it, is that your parents are totally dedicated to giving up their time to help their kid in the best avenue. So those are a few things that come to mind when I think about the number going up to the rafters.
Rick, amazing. You know, I think that just what you said, you know, you put your family first. You know, you were that type of player. You're that type of leader. You know, the Columbus Blue Jackets are lucky to have you. And I'm just going to skip ahead and, you know, you're the director of player development, you know, from working in the NHL. You know, Lee was a professional coach. I always thought, and I still do, and I will, that the director of player development is the most important position in an organization. Because, you know, if a player doesn't pan out, the scouts blame player development blames the scouts. But I think that you can even just draft okay, but if you develop well, you put players in a position to be successful, you tell them the truth, you put them through the path, they trust the path that you put them on. Just talk about, you know, your role now and director of player development and how you work with the young players and just your thought process through that.
Yeah, that's interesting, JB, because you know, now I feel like I got a lot of pressure on me, especially as we're going through this little
that's what JB does, Rick. That's what he
does. Yes, of course. You know, it's funny for me coming as a player and working, you know, a bunch of times with you, JB, off the ice and in all these exercises that we used to do. I'm really trying to bring that to the player development side of it now. And you touched on it a bit with the scouts that see these players probably 30 to 40 times, and then they get drafted to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and then they're handed off to player development. Now I have my team that works with these players to try to get them to become professionals in Columbus Blue Jackets. And we just meet these kids after the draft, so that we get them and we pass them on to the big club once we get there. The thing that I'm trying to do is to make the communication so much better. I want my guys talking to these scouts that already know these players. So yes, they have to go scout the next draft class, but these guys have already invested so much time and know what kind of people they are and what kind of players they are. So I make sure that we have an open door policy here where, you know, if I have to find out about Kent Johnson, who's our 5th overall pick at Michigan, I want to call the scout that watched him for the last 3 years and pick his brain. He's met him, he's done interviews, he's met his parents, just so I have all the information when me and my team kind of take him on. It is a very important time with this position right now as we go through a rebuild here in Columbus. But I think it's a fine line of sharing your experiences, but not overwhelming them with your experiences, because each kid is different. Every single NHL player has a different path. And my path was a high draft pick. And then my coworker, Derek Dorsett, was a non-drafted WHL player into the 5th round, and then had to grind through the AHL to get to the NHL. So I think we're both valuable to these players, but we got to make sure it's their roadmap and not us just kind of telling them how it was in the good old days and how it was back then, and this is what you got to do. We really have to be open to creating their own roadmap, which works best for them.
No, I think that's exactly it. And I think sometimes what we do is we try to take a player and put them in a particular silo, and it might not work, instead of looking at what works for the player. You know what, going back to college might work, for your draft pick, or playing in the AHL, or going somewhere else and playing in Europe and that sort of thing. And I think, Rick, your, just working with you in the past, your ability to, peel back the layers of the onion of people, that's going to be your mark of success. And I got to tell you, Columbus is lucky to have you, and the players under your charge are lucky to have you. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, JB. It's funny you say that, because this job has really turned into, it's more of a relationship. And we've kept in touch from when I got traded out of Columbus to New York. We've kept in touch when I got traded to Boston, and I truly believe it really is about the relationships that you can build with these prospects and these athletes.
Yeah, Rick, let me pull a thread on that a little bit, because we target young coaches, young athletes on this show, right? And look, we all have our kind of preconceived notions when we're 17, 18 years old about what the pros must be like, right? But in your role of player development, how much of that is obviously dedicated to skill versus the person? Because we're kind of alluding to that, right? Because one of the things I've noticed from doing this show and other shows is, when you get to the highest levels, skills obviously very important, but the type of person you are, the way you interact with your community, the way you interact with your coaches and your team, that becomes a really important aspect of finding success. So how much do you deal with the person as much as the player?
For me, I feel like it becomes about the person at first. Now, I think one thing about being in development is you have to be careful, because these kids have the coaches talking to them, they have their parents talking to them, they have their agents talking to them, and then they have this development coach talking to them who just met them a few months ago after they got drafted. So it's a really fine balance. And I've sat down with a few of these college coaches, and just to pick their brain and get information. And we really want to focus on the individual game. So it was a funny story, but there was this defenseman that kept pinching up and trying to finish his check when the team system wanted him to surf, which means going up and then keeping his speed and turning back to create good gap. The NHL team wanted him to get up and finish his check on the pinch. So it was a miscommunication, and there was no communication between the 3 parties or the 4 parties with the advisor and the agent of what the kid is supposed to do. So now he's confused. So the on-ice stuff is important with the individual skill and trying to get their talents better. But the relationship between all parties in the NHL club, the NCAA club, the junior, whatever it is, and the advisor and the parents, I think is more important. So the kids aren't confused. They know what they need to do for their team, number one, which is most important.
Right.
Our player, Ken Johnson, has to do what's best for the Michigan Wolverines and for them to win. Now we can work on his individual stuff, but anything that's system, that's not our area to be in. So hopefully that kind of answers the direction of skill and talent compared to relationship.
Yeah, no, it totally does. Like, I love asking questions like that, because it really uncovers a whole side to this that people just don't generally think about, right? Again, it's usually pretty black and white when you're younger. And the truth is that, great teams, successful teams, outside trust being a major foundation, communication is essential. I mean, immensely essential. And I think, 9 out of 10 problems are probably caused by poor communication, right? So I think that's a great point that you're bringing up here. Rick, I want to dive into this too. On this show, we often explore athletes' journey through adversity. And I'm sure you've faced your fair share of that in hockey. But the one I want to focus on, if we want to call it adversity, is, and you said this, you alluded to this, you were the first overall draft pick in 2002, and you were drafted to a very, very young franchise at the time in the Blue Jackets. So I'm just curious, what were the challenges that you faced if someone in that position, you immediately become the face of the franchise, right? What went well? What would you have changed? And just walk us through that, because I can't literally imagine that.
Yeah, it was kind of a culture shock for me coming to Columbus, Ohio, and being the first overall pick. I grew up in a suburb of Toronto where hockey was basically life. Every kid played road hockey after school. Every kid got a pair of skates for their first Christmas. And then I show up to Columbus, Ohio, and it's kind of a huge Buckeye town, and
Right.
football's huge.
Yeah.
And we're still kind of in the honeymoon stage of the Blue Jackets. And, there's this young first overall pick coming in. So I think with that, I felt a lot of pressure, but at the same time, it wasn't like a Toronto pressure or New York Ranger pressure or something like that, because everyone was just so excited to have professional sports. Now, as my career went on, the pressure definitely started to get to me, and the stress and all these different things. But to show up in a new franchise, it probably comes back a little bit to the development thing. Was I don't know if I was 100% ready to be an NHLer, but being the first overall pick and coming to a new team and being the face, they kind of wanted me in there no matter what. And I think in some ways I was so young at the time. I was only 18, and I didn't even realize that it was the number one pick, and me being the name of the franchise probably didn't even kind of fit into what I was thinking, because I just wanted to play hockey, just wanted to do it for love of the game.
Rick, I'll tell you, well, you did a great job at it, because, I mean, to just go there, you're exactly right. I'm from Pittsburgh originally, so I know a little bit about Columbus. It is the, Ohio State Buckeye town, and you brought that great feel, and it has that, Columbus, and people that haven't been there, Columbus does have this, this unique feel about it when you're there. And obviously, you made your life there, and, you're raising your children there. So, you found love there. Rick, I want to talk about, you being the captain of the team, and, you were looked at as the star player, which you were the captain of the team. And what I felt you brought, and seeing you firsthand do it, and on many occasions, is you brought this calm and quiet approach to leadership. You weren't afraid to ask others for input. I would see you do that. You would ask others for input. Hey, we got to get this guy. We need a little more out of this guy. What can we do? Can you tell the importance of learning and continuing to grow your leadership as you develop as a player and a coach and a leader?
Yeah, for me, and I feel like what I've learned over the years from watching other leaders is that there's no one right way to lead. I think every individual has their own way to lead, and I had some pretty cool captains through the years: Ray Whitney, Luke Richardson, Adam Foote. Guys that I could learn from. And for me, when I first got the captain, I thought it was important that I didn't change. I think that people and humans are too smart to, and they'll see through that. So if I get a letter on my shirt, which is just a letter, and I start coming in and throwing Gatorade bottles and calling guys out, well, I'm not staying true to myself, and I'm not respecting the person who got the letter on his jersey. So I tried to stay the same, but at the same time, now you're managing 25 different personalities, and you guys obviously know this. Some guys need a fire lit up under their butt, and some guys need to be coddled. Some guys need to be, positive feedback, positive reinforcement. So that was kind of the tricky part, was understanding what each player needed as an individual, and for me to deliver that to them. And during all that, one thing never changed for me was I had to lead by example on the ice.
You always did.
Well, thank you. And I always thought, and Ken Hitchcock used to tell me this. He said, if you go, they will follow you. So I knew that every night I had, 24 guys watching me to see how I was going to show up. So I had to go, and I had to get these guys to follow me. So it's a tricky part, but I think you have to stay true to yourself to be a good leader.
Rick, I'll just follow up on that because, as you were saying that, I wrote down genuine, authentic. We're always trying to tell leaders and coaches and players, be genuine and authentic to who you are. A lot of young coaches listen to our podcast and, they want to be Ken Hitchcock or Nick Saban or somebody else. And we always say, Lee and I are like, just be who you are.
Right.
And do that. And so let's talk about, you've played for some wonderful coaches. You played for some fiery coaches, Kenny Hitchcock was a fiery coach, but what I saw you do is your communication with the coaches, for the men, for the people behind you. Hey, coach, we need a day off. Hey, coach, your tone needs to change a bit. Hey, coach, we're working hard. So, and that's a huge responsibility, not only as a player, because as a player, you're trying to take care of yourself, but as the leader, you have to take care of yourself, and you have the group behind you. You have to bring with you, as Hitch said, you go, they'll follow. Talk us through that as far as, dealing with coaches and that communication level.
Yeah, you're right on that, because when you think about it, and it doesn't matter if it's hockey, if it's the workplace, if it's basketball or football, if you're a captain or you're a manager, you're a boss, whatever it might be, I truly feel like you're that pipeline between your team, your workers, to the whether you want to call it the coach or the upper management, whoever it is, you are that pipeline. And there's times when you got to go to battle for your players, whether it's you need a day off or, something's not going right, but it's always important to keep that communication open. And for me, being the person that I am, it was funny. I remember being at Olympic camp in 2006 when the Olympics were in Torino, and I was sitting on the bus beside Steve Yzerman, and he was kind of towards the end of his career, and I was kind of at the start of mine. And we were talking about leadership, funny enough, and he said he's played for all different kinds of leaders, and he's had all different kinds of coaches. And he said the one thing that you have to do is communicate to your players and make sure the coaches and GMs know what your players are feeling, or else they're going to be guessing, and things are going to change, and practices are going to change, and guys are going to get traded if they don't know the true feelings of your players. Now, there's sometimes a divide from GM to coach to players to trainers, but guess what? We're all trying to win the Stanley Cup. So why aren't we all open to this open communication? And just another little side point off how important the communication was Steve expressed to me, and this has always sat with me, was you don't have to be that guy that comes in and yell and scream and throw the towels and break your stick. He said, guess what? That one time when you speak up and say something, it's going to mean that much more when you do it. And it's just something that kind of stuck with me from one of the best captains of all time.
That's exactly it, Rick. And a lot of times, I said this when I was working in professional sports, everybody knows the start line. Everybody knows the finish line, the Stanley Cup. And you have, coaches, GMs, owners, players, trainers. But when you hit the starter's whistle, everybody's running in different directions. Of course, everybody wants to win the Stanley Cup. But I think you're exactly right. The old school of owners own, GMs manage, coaches coach, players play, forget it. You got to have synergy. Excellent. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll dive into that even more, Rick and JB, because we talk about this kind of Disney-fied or cinematic version of the captain, right? The star player that makes the star play and gets the relationship, and in reality, that's not what leadership is. And Rick, you said this that right. I've always said two things about captaincy, right? One is that as a player, if you need that C to lead, you are not ready to have the C. right? And you just affirmed that like you didn't need to change anything. You earned the C for who you were and how you played, and then evolved from there, right? You didn't have to turn into somebody else. The other thing too, and this is one of the quotes that I like to say, is captains are enabled by their coaches and coaches are enabled by their captains. And that's the other half of it. I think sometimes young coaches miss, because your ability to communicate with the coach and vice versa, the captain is the conduit to the team and the conduit for the team to the coach, right? Again, I think a lot of young coaches and captains sometimes miss that. And it's the letter is more important than the job, right? So, and again, you're alluding to this a little bit. I want to dive a little bit more into this, especially at the pro level. And we're talking pro sports here. I imagine that, like you said, that communication, right, of going to a coach and saying this. And let me give you a scenario that you can bring up. I'm sure there's a lot of young captains that feel that their team needs something, but maybe they're afraid to go to the coach because backlash or they don't know how to communicate. How should someone approach that? How did you approach that? Going to a coach with maybe an uncomfortable conversation?
Yeah. Just to touch on a few things that you mentioned, I love that kind of term that you use, that if the player needs to be the captain, then he's obviously not ready to be the captain.
Right.
It's so much, being a leader and being a captain is so much more than a letter. As I always told my other guys, we all have to kind of do what leaders do and do what some of the best leaders in the world do to win. Now, in a scenario where a leader wants to go above and talk, I mean, first of all, if you're a leader, you're confident in your message. You're confident in yourself. I truly believe that if you're going to bat for your team, that you already believe it, or else you wouldn't be going to the coach's room. So if you have any indecision whatsoever that it might not be the right thing, whether it's, we should skip practice today, we should change the power play, we're playing too defensive. If there's any indication that you don't think that's true and you're getting the players below you to try to believe that, then it's probably not the right time to go into the coach's office and tell them. So the number one thing is you have to truly believe in the message that you're going to deliver to the higher above. Other than that, one thing that I learned, and I feel like I honestly learned it from working with JB and doing these things, is use your peers. You are not on an island alone being the captain. You have to use your teammates for support. And I'm sure JB remembers a guy, RJ Umberger. And I used to go to him and lean on him all the time because he was my assistant captain. And we would make sure I'd bounce things off him. He would bounce things off me. And then, so when I did have to go into Ken Hitchcock's office, I knew I was doing the right thing because RJ, kind of gave me that confidence and reassured me that it was the right thing to do. So, for these young captains that might be a little indecision to speak up, talk to your peers and talk to your teammates and bounce this off. Bounce the idea off people around you that you trust. And I think that'll give you the confidence to move forward.
No, and if you're a young captain out there, you know how it is today, Rick, in the NHL, they take the best player and they just stick a C on them. And then that player has this burden of everything. And you're exactly right. What you did is you use your peers, RJ Umberger and some others. And I remember you had conversations about it. Say, hey, what should we do? Okay, all right, I'm going to talk to coach, right? Or I'm gonna talk to this player. And so that's so important to do because, again, you are forming synergy, and you have goodness in the locker room, and goodness forms greatness, and that's what you're exactly trying to get to. Wonderful answer, wonderful question.
Yeah, I want to dive on that one too, JB and Rick. This is one of my favorite questions to ask pro athletes. Especially in recent times when social media can bring a lot to the table in terms of things that are happening that are never actually happening. It's never actually the 100% correct, right? And so where I want to go with that is this, right? I want to talk about culture and how important that is in an NHL locker room or a pro team locker room in relation to winning. And I'll go back to something we said earlier. And it's something we talk about. Like every hockey player dreams of winning the Stanley Cup, right? Every team wants to win. When I talk to a team, I always say, who are we? Why are we here? Well, we want to win. And I would say, that's great. Every team wants that, right? That's not who you are. That's like JB said, that's the finish. We all know the finish line. Why do you want to win? How are you going to win? What will teams say about you when they play? Right. And I want your take on the importance of culture in an NHL locker room. We know the talent is there. Obviously, every NHL team has talent, right? But there's something that separates the teams that are going to the cup final, going to the playoffs consistently, and the teams that don't. I would love your take on that.
Yeah, so that's a lot of information in that question, and it's an important one, and I like kind of what you guys say, because I can show up to training camp every year and say I want to win the Stanley Cup. Okay, well, show me that you want to win it. Be the first guy in the gym. Be the last guy off the ice. Go shoot extra pucks. It's easy to say, but how do you show that? So I think that's where a good professional athlete comes from, is they don't say it all the time and go around saying we want to be a championship team. They actually do it. And that comes back to your, how are you going to be a Stanley Cup champion? How are you going to win the minor hockey AAA championship or be the best coach? It's easy to say, but show us how.
Right.
The second thing was that social media is a huge part of our world, and it can do some really great things, and it can also do some really bad things. And I was just reading an article this morning on the defenseman in Boston that said he deleted all the social media just because he got caught up on reading all the comments and all the nasty comments coming at him. And what I tried to do towards the end of my career for the young guys coming in, because I'll tell you, right after the games, they were in the dressing room stalls, scrolling their phones, seeing what people had to say about them. And I would tell them, you should only really care what 25 brothers have to say about you. And that's the guy that's sitting next to you. I said, and so put your phone down and go talk to your teammate and see if he can help you, or if he can, kind of give you guidance or give you feedback on your game. There's a place for social media that I think is awesome, but then inside the room right after a game, when you're so fresh and back from the game and kind of the emotions are high, the last thing you want to do is be reading people's comments and their thoughts on you. That's when you want to be talking to the guys that you just went through that fight with. Right. I think the last part was culture in your question. How do you create a culture? This is how do you create a culture of what the Tampa Bay Lightning have, or what the Pittsburgh Penguins had? The Chicago Bulls back when they were kind of going on. How do you, and we all watched the Last Dance or whatever the documentary was. How do you create that culture? Well, that's a tough one. I think it starts from when you start drafting these players, and you're bringing in, as we talked about earlier, bringing in not only good players but good people, right? People that want to win for the right reasons. I wish there was a secret formula that when you talk about culture, and that can create this championship team. But in a way, you're gonna need those guys that are kind of, have a little edge to them, and might not be the best leaders, but they're fourth line or third line guys, and they bring so much to the team. So it's really funny when you talk about culture. I think the one thing that every culture has to have is respect. You have to respect the game, and you have to respect the human. With everything going on around sports these days, you have to be honest, and you have to respect the individual of whatever problems they might be having. Right. And you have to have an open door policy, because there's a lot of issues these days, and it's not fair for people to have to hide them or any of that. So when we're trying to create culture here in Columbus, it's total respect for the individual, for the human, and then it's an open door policy. Culture to find a championship team is a tricky one to answer.
Yeah, look, that's a fair answer, and it's more of a feeling, right? I think that when it exists, than even more of like, this is how to create it. And again, I always talk about the levels of accountability, right? And when you're on a team, when any player scores and every player feels like they scored that goal, you're in a special environment. That's actually very rare in my experience. And I've also been on teams where a player scores and, people feel bad that player got a goal. Like I've seen that too. And I think the truth of it is, Rick, is that every team is different. Every team, even if you have the same players every year it's a new team. It's a new environment. People go through life. One of the things you tapped on that I loved was, people have a right to their problems. And I tell young coaches all the time, that 15-year-old kid has a right to his 15-year-old problems. So don't go up to him and tell him that just you wait till you're my age. And that you think that's a problem now. Well, it's not a problem at all when you're 20, whatever. And it's like, it's just not a good way to go at it. Right. You have to understand people deal with things every single day, right? Marriage, kids at your level, right? Other things, obviously. And to not be somewhat empathetic to that and understanding of that is I think a mistake. But when a culture exists, man, you feel it. It's there. JB, did you want to jump in? I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say,
Yeah.
Rick, you said I took a page of notes already. You're saying some wonderful things here. And, we've had on a sports psychologist, Dr. Derek Anderson before, who works in the NHL. And we talked about like goodness and greatness. And we talked about culture, and you can have greatness without goodness, but should you? No, you shouldn't. You should. So goodness leads to greatness. And I think when you're developing culture, exactly, you said we're going to have mutual respect for everyone. Everybody's going to respect everyone. Everyone's not the same human being. Everybody has a different take on life. The other thing you said, which is, we used to say it in the Army Rangers all the time, you can tell as many stories as you want. You can, lie to the girl at the bar, whatever, but the man next to you knows the truth. So that's why you do it. You do it for that person next to you. And you're exactly right. In that group of 25 in that locker room, when they're staring at each other, they know they all give together. And the third thing you said, in talking about the professional level, the late Bill Torrey, the legend Bill Torrey, once told me, him and I were having the conversation about a player, and I felt, the player wasn't like giving all he should for the team. And he said, this player loves everything about the NHL except playing in the NHL. And when I thought about that, of course, the player loved the lifestyle and everything else, but, wasn't willing to sacrifice that extra little bit. And I think you're exactly right. That team dynamics, you need everybody in that team to be that superstar and the last of them. That player's saying, yeah, I'm only getting 6 minutes a night, but guess what? It's going to be a hard 6 minutes. And when I run into you, you're going to feel it. I think that's so important to have that dynamics of winning. And if you look at the teams that have won, Tampa, Pittsburgh in the past, they've all kind of, have had that. So you want to comment on that?
Yeah. One thing that you guys touched on was funny is that when you just bring up this culture and it's tough to explain. And I thought of just a great way to explain it. When you play with some guys that you win a game 5-1 and the guy hasn't scored a goal and he's moping around after the game because he had no points, and then you see that same teammate, you lose a game 4-3 and he had a hat trick and he's running around the room smiling and laughing. Well, you just lost the game. So it was just a funny point that you brought up there, Lee, that kind of hits home with me, is that you can understand that as a coach, as the leader, that you want that player that hasn't scored in 5 games and you're winning on a 5-0 stretch, that's happy to be there and happy to be part of it, because there's other ways you can contribute to the team. But it's funny when you talk about different players and guys, as we were just talking about, someone that loves every single thing in the NHL except that 60 minutes when you're playing the game. Yeah, it's true. But on championship teams, you're gonna have some of these guys that don't quite fit in maybe to the leadership group, or fit into the group that's been there for 8 years or 9 years in the core. But these are going to be added little pieces that come in that help you win a championship. And I'll tell you look around at the championship teams of, probably forever, of every sport, you could probably sit down with the GMs or the coaches or the players, and they could probably pick a guy or two that, didn't fit in, but I'll tell you what, he was a huge part of that championship.
Yeah. One of the things I say to teams when I'm building cultures, building team bonds, I say you don't have to like each other, but you do have to respect each other, right? It's a big ask to get 20, 25 people, or if you even bring in the coaches and the staff, it's a big ask to have everyone like each other. It's actually not realistic at all. So you don't have to like each other, but you said this earlier, you do have to respect each other. And I think from a coaching aspect, and even this could be a captaincy aspect too, now I'm thinking about it. One of the things I like to do now, I like to have an understanding of every player I'm involved with, right? It's not just the top players that I focus on. And I always said one player that I like to spend a lot of time with is, and this does exist even at the top levels, is that player that is not going to get a lot of playing time, but shows up on time, works hard, if not harder than anybody else, right? And really just grinds without much reward. I look for that player because that player may pace the whole team at some points. And I try and explain to this player, and this is where I'm going with this. I'm going to try not to ask 4 questions in one question again. That's my fault. But, what I always think about that player is this. If I can explain to that player their role, that you are not going to play that much, right? But your work ethic is insanely invaluable to the rest of the team because you are the bar that we have to be at. Now, you always hope that's the captain. Don't get me wrong. But I always like to enable that player. And look, we've seen this actually, JB, we brought up Pittsburgh a bunch of times. Like when they were winning those cups back to back, their fourth line was incredible, right? So, Rick, I just want your thoughts on that, or even your approach to that. Of, you can do it from a coaching aspect, a captain aspect, the player aspect. How important it is for every player to know their role and understand the importance of their role, and keeping in mind at your level, people get traded all the time, so it's no guarantee, right? When you think about culture in that aspect, again, I think I asked it as one question there, but that's where I'm going at.
Yeah. So when we went to the Olympics in 2010 and 2014, Steve Yzerman was the GM. And I remember him starting I shouldn't say every single meeting, but the 2 meetings before the tournament even started, he came in and he closed the door and he said, check your ego at the door. He goes, leave it outside because it doesn't matter who you are or what you've done in the NHL. All that matters is the Canadian Maple Leaf on the front of that jersey. And it really hit home when you have someone like him saying, check your ego at the door. So then we go on to doing line mates, and we're sitting in there with Mike Babcock, and he pulls me, Jonathan Toews, and Mike Richards aside, and he says, you guys are going to be a defensive role, shut down line. Okay. Jonathan Toews, captain, Chicago Blackhawks, pretty good player, pretty good numbers over the years. Myself, captain. I believe Mike was the captain of Philly at the time. I believe he was. Yeah. So you want to talk about knowing your role and checking your ego at the door for what's best for the team. So we're lined up against Alex Ovechkin against Russia in the finals against Zach Parise's line. For the Americans, obviously. And we're going to do whatever it takes to win a gold medal. And if that means playing a defensive role and a check-in role, when, we don't do that for our home club. For a home club, we play power play, penalty kill. It just shows that if you can have a coach and a leader that you kind of respect, and then you have players that respect each other and know what the main goal is, anything can be accomplished. Any player that I feel that you talk to and you go explain to him that you can play this way because I know you're good enough, they can do it. And that's just a little story of sharing on roles, because every player does have a role, but that role can change, right? If you're a checker and you're a energy guy, you can do that, but you're still allowed to score goals. You're still allowed to use your skill. You just have to know what part of the game, what part of the season, what part of the tournament, what part of the battle you might be in to bring which role is most valuable to the team. Because I tell these guys when they're around and, they're in the prime of their career, I go, guess what? No one's bigger than the organization. You're going to retire. Columbus Blue Jackets are going to be around forever. The Boston Bruins and New York Rangers are going to be around forever. So you better know your role inside the organization when you're there, because you're going to be gone soon and the team's going to keep on going. And it's funny how it kind of just comes back to relationships. And sorry, I kind of veered off in different directions, but it's
awesome answer.
It's a very important thing around a team and for these coaches, that they have to know what their player's role is, but don't just put them in a box and leave them there as that role, because guys can adjust. Athletes are good enough.
Absolutely. Rick, I love the fact that, if you look at, you and Taves there and Richards, you were tenured players. So you had that experience. And a lot of times athletes and coaches, they want to get from here to here. They want to skip rungs on that ladder. And the only thing that none of us can ever teach is experience. There's no shortcut for experience. So there you were, a senior player, a tenured player with other two players, and say, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do to win. That's amazing. I love it. So Rick, you've played for a ton of coaches, a ton of GMs, leaders, young coaches that are on this podcast. Give them some advice for how to reach out to players, leadership philosophies, anything that you've seen throughout, whether it's good or bad, of the coaches that you've seen, and help them put this into a package together and how they should lead their teams moving forward.
Yeah, it's a very important question. And I'm going to say my first answer might come easy, very easy to some. And I think for others, they might think it's very easy, but it's one of the hardest things to do is listen. Stop thinking about what you want to say back to these young players. Listen to the kid, let them be heard and process it. And you don't have to come back with an answer. You can sleep on it. But I think to be able to be a good listener is a true art. Sometimes you talk to a lot of people and they're just thinking about what they want to say next. And I think if we could all be better listeners, then from a pro level and from a life aspect, we can all be in a better area. The second thing for these young coaches is try not to play games. Some of the best coaches that I had in the NHL were black and white. There was no head games. You always knew where you stood. If you were playing not your best hockey, they were going to tell you that you're not playing your best hockey and you got to be better. And if you were playing good, they would let you know that you were playing okay. They would let you know that you're doing the right thing. So I think for the young coaches is let these guys know where they stand, and don't play head games with them. And I think another thing for coaches and for these young athletes is some advice that a coach shared with me when I was playing in minor hockey, and I kept in touch with him all the way through my NHL career. And I think this is important for kids today too, with the world that they have to grow up in. Is when it's going really bad, it's really not going that bad, and when it's going really, really good, it's really not going that good. So the moral of the story is, don't be a roller coaster. Just keep that even keel and have confidence and trust in your skills and in your tools of life and of being a athlete.
You, Rick, it's amazing. So, we say this all the time, listen is an anagram for silent, right? And it's exactly what you said, like, shut up and listen. You don't have to have an answer back. And I think that's, coaches always want to, because you feel like if you're a leader, if you're a coach, you always have to give input, sometimes you just need to listen to what's happening. And, I'm still working on that in my life and my career.
Yes, we all are.
The other thing we like to say is people may not always want to hear the truth, but they tend to trust those that deal in it. So when a coach says, hey, Rick, A, B, and C need to work on. And when you do, then, that's where you need to be. That's awesome. And then the last one, don't let the highs get too high. Don't let the lows get too low, right? You don't ride that roller coaster. You're a manual transmission, and use your energy, your positive energy, to lift your talent. So when you have your talent, use that positive energy at the time to lift the talent. Those are some great, I'll tell you, I can't wait to coach a Pee Wee hockey team again. They're going to be ready.
Yeah, in that roller coaster, Rick, you're vulnerable at both ends of it. When you're too low or too high, you're vulnerable at two ends of it. And the other thing I love, just to play off what JB's and what you just said, look, great leaders know how to be led. That was I was thrusted into leadership at a young age, and I realized, years later, man, I've never been led, and I realized that you got to learn how to be led, how to listen. That you said it perfectly. Some people it comes easy to, some people it comes hard to. It's really hard for me. I'm a talker. I'm witty. I'm quick, and I've had to, especially in recent years. And this deal is, by the way, realistic in marriage, in hockey, in everything. Is just like, hey, listen, and like I love that you said that. You don't have to answer right away. Let it digest. My wife does that. She digests things and then talks. It took me a while to realize that. Anyway, before I digress, I want to thank you for giving us a look inside that locker room. And I also, for sharing Steve Yzerman's stories. I love Steve Yzerman, a consummate player who completely changed his playing style for his team, right? Again, the younger listeners won't remember. This guy was a amazing goal scorer for years and turned it almost more of a defensive style to win the cup for Detroit back in their heyday. And I also want to thank you for destroying my youth in 2010 by winning that gold medal. JB and I really appreciated that. I can still see Crosby winning that one. Joking aside, obviously, thanks for bringing that up.
But that book was already written before the goal. Everyone knew Crosby was going to score.
Listen, I'll say this as an American.
He knew exactly what he was doing when he got that puck back. Like he knew Miller wasn't going to be at the post.
Right.
He called for it there. Bang. He knew exactly. You're right.
Real quick, I'll tell you, Rick, I remember watching that game, and I'm one of my high school teachers who I'm friends with, right? I was older at the time, and I was on the phone. It was between the break, and he says on the phone to me, he's like, "You know how this is going to end." He goes, "That kid's going to put one in and break our hearts." And sure enough, he did. But listen, obviously this is 11 years ago now. I can appreciate the majesty of that moment for the game, for the country, and everything. It really was an amazing team that you got to be part of there. So look, before we let you go, I have one question we always ask every guest this. Our organization, Grit, we're all about breaking the stigma surrounding mental fitness in sport. We all deal with ups. We all deal with downs when it comes to our mental fitness. I want to know, how do you define mental fitness, and how do you continually work on that in your daily life?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer.
We only ask tough questions here, Rick. That's all we.
Yeah, I really feel that way, because mental toughness is funny, and it's changed a lot over the years.
Right.
I'm sure when we all played sports, and obviously, different levels of work and jobs that we've done. There used to be a stigma kind of around mental toughness, and it was be strong, kind of, I don't know, keep your mouth shut and go about your business and whatever it is. And that's just not healthy. I truly believe, I think we have to talk about our mental health and where we stand. It's not okay for someone to feel that they're alone and that they have no support. We have to make sure we reach out to our loved ones and we tell them that we love them and that we're here to help them no matter what they're going through. And I don't mean to go off here a little bit on the mental health, but that's what I truly believe it is. People have to feel that support and feel that they can open up about anything, because at the end of the day, this life is too short to not live a special one and kind of hide things. There's a lot of help out there that people can get if that's an issue. And I'll tell you what, from mental health to mental being mentally tough is one thing too. You can exercise your brain, as you guys both know. There's things that we can do to become mentally strong, in my opinion. And I don't know if you guys agree with me or 100%. Disagree, but I think there's it's a muscle. We all work out, we all go for runs, we all go on the bike, we all skate. Well, let's start working on our mental toughness as well.
Right. One of the things we talk about on the show, Rick, is I've actually started using the phrase mental fitness more, because everybody knows what physical fitness is. And we can all relate to physical fitness. And it just to your point, there is a mental fitness. We need to work on our minds. We need to work on our brains, and individually and as groups, right? Human beings are meant to work together as a species. So, Man, this has been a really great time, Rick. I really appreciate you being here. I got to tell you this, you and I are the same age. So, I followed your entire career. And I'm getting to the age now where I have seen a full career, right? Not when I came in, it was, and I just think you did it with such grace. Your talent has always been undeniable. And when we JB and I saw that they were going to retire your number, I mean, nothing but just like absolutely deserved and wonderful feelings. So I just going back to your first answer, I love the way you described that your family was the first thing you thought about. It wasn't about the games, it wasn't about the teams, it was about your family. Somewhat that you have a place, now, and it goes back to what you said too, that, there's a team before me, there's a team after me. I'm on this team right now, and you absolutely deserve what you're getting there, man. So congratulations.
And I'll just add, Rick, I've worked with, thousands of athletes, and without a doubt, you're one of the most respectful, one of the most disciplined, one of the most lead by example leaders that I've ever come around. You, Sid, Barkov, and it's easy to say, and it's because of your upbringing. It's because of who you were, and you were genuine and you were authentic. And you know what? I was honored to spend time with you. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And with the number going up to the rafters, it's funny. It's an individual number, but there's a lot of people that are going up there with me. And I don't mean to blow smoke up your butt there, JB, but you were part of this. You had me when I was a fresh, wide open eyed kid and just getting a captain. And it's people like you that made this career and made 61 go up in the rafters possible. So that stuff doesn't go unnoticed. And then you work with some pretty special people. So for you to say that, I appreciate that. And you know what, it was fun talking to you guys about these issues, because sometimes, you just do all the kind of as you mentioned earlier on, you just kind of hit the surface of these things. So to dive in deep, and it was fun, and there's so many stories about leadership and about coaching and all these things that are so important that you guys are giving back to this younger generation with stories and having these different guests. So thank you guys for having me.
And I'll just leave it one thing before I turn it back to Lee, is the Columbus Blue Jackets players are lucky to have you, and those players that are getting drafted to your organization are absolutely lucky to have you, Derek Dorsett, and men and women that, care about who they are as human beings. And regardless if they end up playing, professionally or not, that doesn't matter. You have them on that journey to success. And so that's beautiful.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Rick. Again, we do try and avoid the, answers. We chip in, chip out, keep the boys moving. Yeah, you can only hear that so many period breaks in a row. But I really appreciate the compliment and for you dedicating so much time. I know you're a busy guy. So thank you for that. So that's going to do it for this episode of Win Championship Trades for Life. Again, we're powered by Pivotal Moments. You can learn more about our organization and grit at pivotalmomentsmedia.com for a ton of inspirational content like this episode. Hopefully entertaining as well, and educational stuff. For Rick Nash and JB Spizzo, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us. Keep an eye out for more episodes soon wherever podcasts can be heard, and keep winning out there. Take care.